Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week,
Iran's threat to the United States in the United States.
Stop us if you've heard this one before. Weapons of mass destruction, the threat of terror from the Middle East, and the American media are misbehaving. The war on journalism in Mexico, one of the most graphic examples yet. Hot off the presses in Tripoli, journalists get a whiff of the Arab Spring. And Argentinian high rollers coasting through Buenos Aires. Our web video of the week. WMDs, long-range nuclear missiles, terrorist sleeper cells, and threats against Israel and the United States. Those are all terms that the world grew familiar with in the months and years immediately after 9/11, and they are featuring once again in 2012, particularly on the American news media. This time it's Iran, not Iraq, but the terminology is strikingly similar. So are the misgivings of those who warn against an invasion, and there are parallels aplenty in the way the media are conducting themselves. What is different is that unlike the run-up to the Iraq War, which was led by rhetoric coming out of the Bush administration, this time the Obama administration is not saying that much, at least not publicly, but elements within the U.S. media are banging the war drums nonetheless. And some of the very same news organizations that swallowed the flawed or faked intelligence pre-Iraq are up to the same old tricks, using anonymous government and quote-unquote intelligence sources to back up their stories. Our starting point this week is Washington and the lessons from Iraq that appear to have gone unlearned on the Iran story.
Tonight, defying the world. The Iranians claim a major advance in their nuclear program.
The coverage of Iran in the United States by our media has been disastrous.
Iran is changing its game plan.
They seem to be working from very limited vocabulary, very limited images and ideas.
Further proof that Iran wants to join the club of nuclear nations.
It becomes sort of a feeding frenzy, one-upping one another.
All right, showdown with Iran.
You know, the media is the media. It's not perfect.
Iran is warning that it may take preemptive action.
I've seen this movie before, and it does not turn out well.
The movie to which he refers is Iraq.
Saddam Hussein appears to have survived the first wave.
The politicians who took America into that war still defend that decision. However, the U.S. media have, in many cases, admitted to their shortcomings in examining the case for the invasion and vowed not to be manipulated in that way again. They must have short memories.
ABC World News.
The evidence of a kind of shadow war now being waged by Iran around the world.
This ABC News story was filed by the network's chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross.
Day, Brian.
Remember those reports that came out 6 weeks after 9/11, linking the anthrax letters in the U.S. to Iraq? Quoting anonymous sources, Brian Ross broke that story, which would have been good if the story was true. Not only was it false, but ABC News has never retracted it. ABC remains on the record with Brian Ross's Iraq anthrax story.
Israeli diplomatic facilities and Jewish places of worship in at least 10 U.S. cities have been told they could be targets.
Now, more than 10 years later, again quoting unnamed sources, Ross is painting a scary picture of Iran. The Listening Post requested an interview with ABC on this. We received no reply.
It's lazy journalism. It's not that any of the people that work at ABC decided, hey, you know, wouldn't it be great for all of us if we started a war with Iran, like that terrible war in Iraq? They just get a source and they think, okay, well, that's a source. I've got a scoop, so I'm going to run with it. And off to war we go, because look at that. Everybody on TV agrees Iran is very dangerous and might attack, so we best go after them.
Then there was this segment from CNN's Erin Burnett.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Erin Burnett, and out front tonight, Iran's threat to the United States in the United States, right here at home.
She begins with a comment saying, well, the whole world knows Iran is going to build a nuclear weapon. Well, the whole world doesn't know that. So I think sometimes these editorial comments that are thrown in by news anchors are extremely unhelpful.
6,000 miles. That is far enough to hit the United States of America.
I think, how can you possibly say that on television? There are a great number of people believe that they don't have a nuclear weapons program, because right now, they don't have a nuclear weapons program.
Journalists like Erin Burnett and others need to be especially vigilant not to play up threats that that have been discredited or that are seen as premature or exaggerated, and focus on what we actually know. And I think too often in the last couple of weeks, journalists have been looking at what-if scenarios and hypotheticals more than what intelligence we actually have that there's a real threat.
Fear-mongering is the definitive aspect of this kind of journalism. Iran is a threat. This threat is coming to the United States. This threat is coming home to us.
They see a growing possibility of an attack by Iran on American soil.
The Iranians are not blameless in what has so far been a war of words. One of Iran's state-run channels now features nuclear imagery in its news graphics, even when the story, like the one it's reporting here, has nothing to do with the nuclear issue. It's just a provocative graphic. And there are some examples of the U.S. media altering their approach. CNN host Fareed Zakaria, an enthusiastic backer of the Iraq War, is taking a different tack this time around.
Fareed Zakaria did an excellent interview with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, in which Dempsey said that it's not prudent to have an attack on Iran at this time.
We are of the opinion that the Iranian regime is a rational actor.
So we have some variety.
You've seen some very good coverage of Iran in the past few weeks, but a lot of times that reporting was overshadowed by the more sensationalist types of stories. With recent Iran coverage, you've seen stories playing up the possibility of a threat on U.S. soil, even though there's no evidence so far of a threat on U.S. soil. You've seen these stories rise to the top and oftentimes get more play than the stories that perhaps are more nuanced.
It is very important to keep in mind that this doesn't represent the entirety, the spectrum of American journalism. Right now, as you know, we are mourning the death of a fantastic journalist, Anthony Shadid, who passed away in Syria. They are in print media. They are for people who actually read. Whereas this kind of yellow journalism, you just put the word Iran and nuclear next to each other and throw it at your camera. It is a free-for-all, and they do this kind of journalism with complete impunity.
And if opinion polls are to be believed, then sensationalist, threat-laden reporting in the U.S. is winning the day.
7 out of 10 Americans believe that Iran already has a nuclear weapon. That is so dangerous. That's the kind of misinformation that we had before the Iraq War. So we have that same kind of gross failure by the United States media here, as they have misinformed the American public and unfortunately created propaganda that helps to warmonger against a country that does not have nuclear weapons, and that our intelligence and military officials think it is unwise to attack. But nonetheless, you have that clamoring for it in our media.
Like most big news stories, the coverage of this conflict has been picture-driven. But here's one image most Americans have not seen: a map. That's Iran, in the middle. Each of the stars represents an American military base. There are 44 of them. The country is surrounded. Of all of the questions about Iran being asked on the U.S. airwaves today, they might want to start with this one. Just who is the threat to whom? Our Global Village voice is now on the U.S. media and the Iran story.
The way that American media focus on Iran's nuclear activity has very negative ramifications on rationality of diplomacy. These medias are acting as like a bad interpreter, a bad translator who impedes mutual understanding between two sides.
The current crisis with Iran is a good example of how the media is helping to define and strengthen American foreign policy rather than explore the realities of the crisis and cover the news. The media has rallied to support a clear political and partisan goal to bomb Iran.
Unfortunately, some sections of the US media have taken it upon themselves to act as judge, jury, and executioner in their news coverage on the Iranian nuclear program. We've already witnessed this in the bloated media coverage that preceded the invasion of Iraq. Today, stories are almost created in order to establish narratives.
Time now for Listening Post News Bites. The casualty figures in Syria keep mounting. Scores of civilians are being killed, and in this past week, 2 more foreign reporters died while trying to cover the story in Homs. American journalist Marie Colvin worked for the Sunday Times in the UK. She and a French photographer, war zone veteran Remy Ochlek, were both killed under shelling in the city. A third journalist, CNN's Ottawa Damon, tweeted from the same location, wounded in attack that killed 2 journos need emergency help to get out and get medical care. She later tweeted that she was able to get out of Syria and into Lebanon.
Shelling started at 6:30 in the morning.
Shortly before Ms. Colvin perished, she told the BBC that the shelling of civilian areas of Homs was sickening, that she had just watched a 2-year-old baby die, and that Syrians could not understand why the international community was not doing more to end the bloodshed there. The day before that attack, local journalist and videographer Rami Al-Sayed was also killed by shelling in Homs. Al-Sayed was said to have played a key role in documenting the casualties at the hospital there, posting videos on his YouTube channel. This video that shows Al-Sayed was the last one posted on that channel, apparently by his brother. The doctor in it later said that Al-Sayed was killed because he was reporting the truth. Score 1 for the cynics, because Rupert Murdoch's sun will be rising on Sunday after all. For many a media analyst, it was just a matter of time before Murdoch replaced his now defunct Sunday paper, The News of the World, with a Sunday version of his tabloid daily, The Sun. The media mogul flew into the UK February 16th, ostensibly to fight some corporate fires and to boost morale after more journalists at The Sun were arrested for allegedly bribing police in London. However, during the visit to the newspaper's headquarters in Wapping, Murdoch reportedly told Sun employees that The Sun on Sunday would be hitting the newsstands soon. Its editor will be the current Sun editor, Dominic Mohan, and there's an executive position going to the former deputy editor of the News of the World, Victoria Newton. It's also been speculated that Murdoch has been under pressure from News Corp shareholders in the U.S. to discard what they see as the toxic British newspaper arm of the company. So it was probably with them in mind that the media mogul tweeted, just for the record, News Corp shares up 60 cents on news of Sun on Sunday, highest for the year. Even by Mexican standards, where journalists live in constant danger, last November's attack on a newspaper was extraordinary. Now the video of that attack has surfaced. About 15 armed men vandalized the offices of El Buen Tono in the southeastern state of Cordoba barely a month after that newspaper was launched. The CCTV footage was reportedly confiscated by the police, but then later returned anonymously to the paper in an attempt to help identify the perpetrators. The attack was obviously premeditated, if not very well thought out. The vandals spent a lot of time smashing windows and equipment, only to then douse the entire office with petrol and burn it all down. The motive behind the attack is still not entirely clear, but the paper had been critical of local authorities and accused the mayor of corruption. Violence against the media in Mexico is usually tied in some way to the country's drug trade, which is rampant. The Spanish newspaper El País has an international audience, but the February 16th edition of the newspaper failed to make it onto newsstands in Morocco. That's because the authorities there did not like this cartoon, a caricature of King Mohammed VI. According to a government spokesman, it was a deliberate intention to smear the king's image, to harm the king personally. The cartoon was accompanied by an article written by Spanish journalist Ignacio Sembrero, who reportedly told Agence France Presse that he was surprised by the reaction, that he thought the cartoon was friendly and a bit likable. The journalist has also said that this appears to be the first time that the moderate Islamist Justice and Development Party has banned an international publication since it came into power in January. This kind of thing has happened before in Morocco, though, under previous governments. In 2009, El País was banned temporarily for being disrespectful. The French publication Le Nouvel Observateur had the same thing happen to it earlier this year, as did the French magazine L'Express International last year. For decades, the media in Libya served as not much more than propaganda tools for Muammar Gaddafi. However, in the wake of the revolution, and in some cases even before the fall of the regime, Libyans have seen an explosion of brand new media outlets. By the middle of last year, there were more than 120 new publications, as well as fresh alternatives on the radio and television airwaves. And in a country where a year ago media freedom was on a par with North Korea and Somalia, journalists are enjoying their new liberties. They're writing, publishing, and broadcasting material they find newsworthy. This new generation of Libyan journalists is trying to make up for its lack of training and experience through sheer energy and enthusiasm. The Listening Post's Flo Phillips now on a magazine called The Libyan, which is coming off a printing press in Tripoli and trying to find a readership in a country where for 40 years journalism has existed in a state of hibernation.
home of the Libyan, first issued in the throes of the revolution last May.
This is the printing machine. Papers are put here, ink, and then it comes out from the other side.
40 glossy pages of Libyan politics, economics and culture.
They take it here at the end to cut it and make it the size that we're looking for.
With a circulation of 6,000 copies every month, and content entirely generated by the magazine's 29-year-old editor-in-chief.
They're all our pictures. We work with different photographers, work with different journalists, different writers to put the magazine together. Let's say half of the magazine is political. The political scene seems to be the most important. And at the end, it's the culture and history. Because, you know, for the past 40 years, we didn't know much about the history and the culture of Libya as well, you know. We lived in a media blackout.
Not anymore. The concept of press freedom is novel to Libyans, and for lots of young journalists like Ibrahim, a very welcome change. The National Transitional Council has been largely welcoming of new media outlets. Just days after the new cabinet was sworn in, delegates attended a 2-day media conference, stressing its priority to reimagine the national media system.
يجب أن يكون في ليبيا إعلام مستقل ومفتوح يعطي صورة انطباعاً مغاير عما كان في ليبيا في السابق.
The Libyan is just one example of independent free media that has exploded onto the scene in the last year.
I mean, this is something that happened almost overnight with the revolution, with the liberation. People who have lived for decades under the thumbs of the Gaddafi and his clan, now they are basically taking advantage of this opportunity.
It has started from the first day that Benghazi was liberated. And we noted that more than 80 newspapers in Benghazi, more than 60 in Muzarata when it was liberated. And in Tripoli now, more than 26 or 30 newspapers.
We have now more than 200 networks there, broadcast, radio, television, as well as print and online. Unfortunately, because of 40 years of oppression and 40 years of denial of access of information, many of the outlets need a lot of work because the infrastructure to begin with was non-existent.
Unlike its Arab neighbors, Egypt and Tunisia, which experienced limited freedom of the press, Libya is pretty much a virgin territory when it comes to media. Gaddafi dictated the narrative for more than 40 years, a one-man band, always singing from the same green songbook.
Under Gaddafi's regime, there was no free press. All the journalists or writers has to select their words, otherwise they will be in trouble. If you criticize the regime itself, Gaddafi or one of his sons, then you are in real trouble.
Gaddafi had two major satellite stations, one controlled by him and the other one was controlled by his son. And both studios existed in Tripoli. Nothing existed in Benghazi because he wanted to centralize everything and keep everything under his control.
For the past 40 years as well, we only had state-owned media. We're only used to one voice. Magazines, newspapers, they all speak the same language. Now they're following different parties, supporting different political figures, and it's different.
Different for the readers and exciting for the journalists in Libya. But the quality of the output doesn't exactly match up to the quantity, and there are reasons for this. Back in the Gaddafi days, his public press authority tightly controlled the flow of information, spinning the story right to the very end.
Tripoli is well protected.
The legacy of that era is that many of Libya's journalists are entirely new to the field and haven't had a chance to build up their skills.
The media in Libya is in a chaos situation. They don't have a management to lead them and to have a sort of a roadmap for them, how to talk, how to select their topics. They just do it without having the know-how that we are talking about.
They realize that they lack professionalism. I feel that the youth and the young people who came into the industry, they realize that they need help and they need training.
The magazine established by young Libyans, you know. None of us had the experience. We were on the front line. We were around the cities, you know, at the beginning in Benghazi, then in Tripoli, the liberation of Tripoli, and Misrata. We're not trained. It's all new, and we are trying to overcome this obstacle.
And getting past these obstacles in Libya's newly liberated media space is a bigger challenge than some might imagine. It's a learning curve, not just for journalists,
but for a Libyan society unused to being scrutinized by the media. Rula Abu Bakr works for the Libyan magazine. An article she wrote, published back in October, revisited tensions experienced by doctors and nurses in one of Tripoli's central hospitals during the revolution. She didn't expect the feedback she received.
The story was of how much they've been suffering throughout the revolution. It upset some people because I mentioned some names. I mentioned Dr. Masoud al-Sabi that was helping nurses to get to the Green Square to support Gaddafi. He was really angry. At first, it was him going around the hospital and just getting angry. Then it got bigger. Then it was just like him threatening. He wants to sue me. He wants to sue the magazine. So I just ignored that. And then he took other measures, which is trying to pull my dad into it. It kind of makes you feel like you still can't say anything you want at the moment. You still can't say what is exactly really going on here. You know, you're gonna know someone's behind your back planning something.
Libya faces myriad challenges in the months ahead, but new media outlets like The Libyan, prepared to speak truth to power, are well positioned to make a serious contribution to the debate over its country's future.
The difference today is the fact that Libyans have options. They have more than 200 media outlets. It's creating a confusion because we're going from nothing into having hundreds of opinions out there.
But who's really complaining? For the first time in 42 years, Libyans can actually watch, listen, and read whatever they want, whenever they want to.
More Global Village Voices now on media in Libya in the post-Gaddafi era.
In the new Libya, journalists have unprecedented freedoms. However, this newfound freedom has not resulted in better quality journalism. This is due to mismanagement and lack of professionalism. Journalists who have the skills and talent are finding it very difficult to find credible and professional media platforms.
Another issue is that now Libya is seeing a lot of self-censorship, with the popular belief that one should not be criticizing the transitional government at a time of rebuilding.
There are many challenges facing the new media institutions in Libya, such as building the trust between the institutions and the citizens, providing impartiality, and also addressing sensitive issues in Libya. The onus is on the authorities to provide a framework or guidance for local media institutions to operate under.
Finally, a few years back, an unknown filmmaker from Uruguay posted a video of a giant alien robot invasion that he made on his own on a budget of just $300 with special effects that were slick enough to rival some of the world's biggest and best. That film went viral instantly and eventually landed the budding director a seven-figure film deal from Hollywood. Not a bad career break, and one that another filmmaker, Fernando Lifshitz from neighboring Argentina, might have been inspired by. His homemade video, a dreamt-up roller coaster ride around the city of Buenos Aires, is now speeding around the World Wide Web. It's called Inception Park, and it's our web video of the week. We'll see you next time at The Listening Post.
Words, then you're like me, don't worry now, I won't hurt you.